Okay.
Welcome back, everyone. My name is Michael LeBlanc, Director and Senior Portfolio Manager, and thank you for joining us here on our Tuesday live weekly update on everything we see in the markets, everything we see up and coming. And today we're going to be talking about AI, artificial intelligence. So thanks for joining us here. If you're watching this on a recording or on the podcast, if you're listening to it and you'd like to ask any questions, by all means, go to mikeonmoney.com, where you can reach us at or find all our contact information and our other social media if you would like to see other videos like this. But let's jump into things. So just by our normal disclaimer, everything that we talk about here today is for information purposes. Always do your own due diligence or seek the advice of a professional before acting on any strategies in your portfolios. We do try to keep the information as accurate, as up to date as possible, but things are constantly changing and your situation may be different than others. So do that double check on your own. As I said, just go to mikeonmoney.com. We'd happily help you out any way that we can. If you are watching live and you have some questions, you can click that Q&A button. We'll try to get to them in this session. If not, we will follow up with you right after today's broadcast. So with that, I'll jump in. For those who notice in different background, maybe different lighting, I am working up at Whistler trying to beat the heat. So hopefully all of you are doing the same back in the city. It has been a bit cooler up here until today. I think today was the hotter day in Whistler versus the city. But I have been taking the dog to the lake as much as possible in the afternoons, cooling us both off and trying to beat this heat. So hopefully everyone is doing the same. And of course, as you're hearing everywhere in the news, drink lots of water, stay hydrated out there. So let's talk about what we see coming up this week. The home price index for April is coming out of the United States. Looking at that. Also the consumer confidence index for June. So that's been climbing quite a bit recently. If you ever follow one of these graphs, you overlay that with market performance. There's kind of this, as it approaches 1, it always ranges between -1 and 1. As it approaches closer and closer to 1, we tend to get a little bit into correction territory. So we're looking at those numbers to see where we're going to be at, just to see how high that ratio is getting. That overconfidence, or sometimes called exuberance phase. And of course, as it approaches -1, it is at capitulate stage where everyone's kind of saying, that's it, everything's cheap enough, let's buy back in again. So it would be an interesting number to keep an eye on, just to see where we're at on that chart. We have seen again some continued wobble markets, especially in the United States. That confidence level starting to decrease a little bit on the Delta variant, and you're going to see that reason come up in a few of our discussions today. There is some growing concern on the effect of the Delta variants having on different areas around the world and what that might mean. And as I mentioned, the S&P 500 in the US, wavered a little bit between gains and losses yesterday and today. Slight gains, but again, pretty flat. And we're seeing the same thing overseas, and they're coming out later today, actually, to the EU's central bank head is going to come out and talk a little bit about what's going on over there. The stretched out global supply chain. We've talked about the supply chain a lot through the shutdown. If you've been following it, it's been basically this, not disconnect, just simply, we go into shutdowns, supply chain gets shut down, then we start seeing shortages, then we reopen all of a sudden, but it takes a while for the supply chain to catch up on that demand while new demand is pouring in. And actually, one of the dangers we often see in these scenarios is because the supply chains have been tapped and the demand is out there, all of a sudden, companies will over order, right? They'll say, oh, if I can't get it for this long, I'm going to take extra inventory, or I'm going to bring in more than what I think I need for the short term because I'm not going to be able to get it again soon. But in the meantime, you have the supply chain ramping up production to meet this now surge of demand that's out there. And then all of a sudden you have a glut, right? You have too much in inventories and you have too much production happening. Hopefully we don't get into to too much of that through this reopening. Hopefully there's some manufacturers and retailers out there who are thinking that wave through, although it's always seems like more companies get caught into it than you would think when these things happen. We are, this particular ones are looking at the restaurant chains though. Of course, the restaurants have been through whiplash through this whole pandemic with opening and closures, stocking their shelves, stocking their inventories, having to have their inventories go bad, back and forth several times. And now they're now thrown back into the boat where their supply chain, has been either shut down or slowed down because of the lack of demand. And now all of a sudden a big surge, and we have this delay of that supply chain being able to meet that bottleneck. So you might see a lot of menus changing very quickly at your local eateries, as it depends on what supplies they can get, and even might see a little bit of price surging, or not surging, but increases as they might have to pay extra for their supplies. Or on the flip side, we're going to see their revenues their profits dip a little bit while they take a little bit more chunks out of their profit with the rises in costs that they're seeing in the supply chain. The Canadian aero suppliers face a labor crunch as travel starts to rebound. So we've seen this in pretty much every sector as things have started to reopen. Is people were laid off, some went out and got other jobs, sometimes completely different industries. And then when this surge comes back again, and you want to have that labor back, or you want to get those people back, a lot of them aren't there. And even if you can hire, which has been difficult for, especially when we talk about skilled labor, right? You talk about aerospace firms. They need people with certain training, certain education. But they've lost a big percentage of that, and we haven't seen those numbers yet. But obviously, a lot of people went and found jobs maybe in other areas, still using their skill sets. But trying to hire people back, it's not like you can just take someone fresh without any experience and necessarily fill some of these jobs. So we're seeing this big labor crunch issue across all sectors. The latest one we're seeing, of course, is aerospace. And that's going to probably continue to be a problem as we get that balance out there and people get retrained. I mean, we saw it in the restaurant industry as well. You can find laborers, but not the experienced servers, the experienced cooks, the experienced bartenders, all these different areas that for sure we can find people, but not necessarily with the experience and skill sets that you want built in. So we'll keep an eye on that, but that's all going to weigh on profits, as it will likely cause companies to start raising income. Not a bad thing, but it does push up inflation. And remember, that's always something we're keeping very close eye on these days. McConnell, is up in pressure on Biden around the Democratic infrastructure bill. This is a back and forth. President Biden was supposed to have a weekend away at Camp David to rest this last weekend, but he had to stay in town to try to save this bipartisan infrastructure deal, as Democrats are looking at attaching a larger reconciliation package to it. Obviously, this is a back and forth that's going to continue for a while, and we'll just have to see kind of how it plays out over the next little bit. On the mergers, the M&A front, Ventus is looking to buy a new senior investor group in an all-stock transaction at $2 billion. Seems like $2 billion has been the going price for a lot of deals lately. Every time I see one, it seems to be that $2 billion number. But this is, Ventus is a healthcare-focused real estate investment trust. New senior investment is senior housing. So Ventus is just looking at, diversifying out their their real estate holding or their revenue streams a little bit beyond pure healthcare play. So that transaction looks like it's going to go through. We'll keep an eye on that. And we're also seeing Principal Financial to exit some of their business after strategic review. So this is actually kind of a good thing when you look at some companies, I've seen, in years gone by, TransCanada Pipeline, TransAlta in Alberta, many companies will take a look at different business lines that they've expanded to through the years and start to say, hey, this one makes sense, this one doesn't. Here's our core specialty and our core revenue. These ones add little value as far as to our core business, and little value as far as, say, revenue or profits go. And they'll look at selling those off and cleaning up a balance sheet, right? Taking that debt or taking that value by selling it to another firm that maybe can do more or vertically integrate it with more effectiveness to bring higher profitabilities and more revenue to them, and take that the money from the sale of those assets and clean up a balance sheet or improve a balance sheet. And here you have Principal Financial Group out there selling off their fixed annuity and consumer life products, and looking to buy back stock. So, always good for the shareholder in the long run, and good for the company in the long run. So, that's an interesting story to take a look at, as they might be turning their balance sheet around significantly. U.S. Consumer Watchdog approves the new foreclosure protection. So, of course, through the pandemic, different states, and of course here in Canada as well, there's been protections have been put into place against foreclosures of home, people who weren't able to make their mortgage payments due to the struggling effect that they might be experiencing during the pandemic. We even saw that with evictions not being allowed to happen in certain states during certain period of time. So all that is starting to unwind now. And they have put in some new protections on the foreclosures, but they're not stopping foreclosures. So they're basically saying, okay, it's not going to be as easy as it was to put a foreclosure process into place, but as long as you meet all these requirements, you will be continuing to foreclose. And we're also seeing that happen, as I mentioned, on the evictions. Those protections starting to unwind. So that's actually something we're going to have to watch really closely on the U.S. housing market. Not so much in Canada. The Canadian foreclosure system is very different than in the United States. Of course, one of the biggest differences, you can't just walk away from a home and let the bank deal with your debt like we saw in the 08-09 crisis in the United States. In Canada, if you walk away, you're still on hook for that debt. The bank can take the home, perhaps sell it, and but if there's any debt left over, you're still on the hook for that. So it's not quite, we don't see it as prolific here in Canada because it's not, you don't get just to kind of walk away from an undervalued debt like that. So we'll watch the US more and more as these things fold out. Also a lot on those evictions, because a mass eviction process would also be fairly detrimental to the housing market down there. As far as the COVID update goes, I think everyone's pretty much on top of this. Things improving continuously. The vaccine rollouts are going very successfully. Everything's looking great for the reopening. July 1st here in BC. Our target date to kind of go to step 3. July 5th, of course. Travel internationally. If you have both vaccines, you can return to Canada without doing your quarantine period. Numbers continue to drop. But that being said, as we've always talked about, this is a global thing. It's not just Canada. It's not BC, Ontario, and Quebec. It's around the world. And that Delta variant is still out there. Now, the vaccines are testing very well against it. I heard a latest report this morning that the Johnson & Johnson one was now recommending a booster because the Johnson & Johnson vaccine was originally a one-shot vaccine as opposed to the other ones that required that booster shot. Now, for the Delta variant, Johnson & Johnson's looking at studies that are suggesting that booster might help. But that being said, the Delta is still causing problems. We're seeing some flare-ups in LA, of course, in the UK, and many countries around the world still being an issue. So as far as travel goes, I think it's going to be a little bit longer as countries kind of get things under control a little bit more, and that Delta variant gets under control a little bit more. And also that, you know, as I said, coming back to Canada, you might not have a quarantine requirement, but depending on where you go, you might have a quarantine requirement, or at least be able to show proof of vaccine that you've had both shots here in Canada. So we'll keep you updated on that, but things are going well, obviously, in Canada here. The reopenings continue to move forward. We haven't seen any, we've seen some localized spikes with the Delta variant, but nothing massive. And it doesn't seem like any of the jurisdictions are stepping back from the reopening plan. So let's take a look at the US. As I mentioned, that consumer price index moving up. We're looking for June, looking for it to go up a little bit. United Airlines holding is expected, which they did already, unveil a major plane order of 274 narrow body jets, almost $30 billion worth of new planes as they look to reopen the airways. So good for the aerospace and manufacturers, although we've just heard they're short employees. So how long before those planes are delivered could be a while, given the supply chain problems there. And of course, every week it seems to be another state of Federal Reserve Bank committee is getting together and talking about the monetary policy. So we continue to listen to their message in there on inflation. We also see some new news on the immunization effectiveness of the shots, particularly AstraZeneca. The mix and match approach seems to boost the immunity quite well, especially against the Delta, which is what everyone's looking at. So this is just the if you had AstraZeneca for your first shot, of course, here in BC and across Canada, I think pretty much you can get Moderna or Pfizer as your second shot, and they're saying that's actually giving you a really strong boost by mixing that, as opposed to getting two AstraZenecas. So, which is good, because the AstraZeneca in Canada, particularly, they're not doing first shots as far as I'm aware across Canada, and in a lot of provinces, BC is still doing second shots for people, but a lot of the provinces, I believe Ontario and Quebec, are not doing second shots for AstraZeneca, that they are doing the RMNA vaccines for the second shots, either Pfizer or Moderna. So all those studies are looking like you're almost even better protected than having the double dose of AstraZeneca. As I mentioned, United Airlines did go out and buy those 274 jets. So we'll keep an eye on what that means for them. And as I mentioned, the booster for the J&J against the Delta is now starting to be recommended. Although J&J pretty much for North America has been kind of pulled or not approved. I've not known anywhere in Canada that the Johnson & Johnson's been distributed. There was quite a bit of it. The US had shipped over to India during their crisis, but I think India is actually doing a new study on its effectiveness as well, as more and more of the Pfizer and Moderna become available over there, as well as the AstraZeneca over there. So we'll keep an eye on J&J's vaccine. It seems to be they continue to stumble with their rollout. White House is pushing an order on antitrust enforcement throughout the U.S. economy. So if you've been following us for a while, there's been a lot of antitrust suits, across the United States, even through Europe, against some of the big tech companies. In fact, Facebook just won one recently in their favor, which pushed their stock up higher last week. And there's a bunch more kind of coming through. And the White House is just pushing out some more orders, basically some rules around what the antitrust suits need to have and how to enforce them. It's not to block them, it's not to stop them, it's not to protect the tech companies. It's just to put some structure around it so that there's some guidelines as to how these things should be organized and how they should be put through. And if you didn't follow the news the other day, Verizon was off showing off its 5G connected robots. Again, leaning a little bit into our AI discussion we're talking about today, but showcasing two robots that use 5G technology and mobile edge computing to communicate with each other, which is funny enough because Facebook actually had two robots that they had put AI into to kind of test their AI and see how it learned. And they shut those two robots down recently after the two robots developed their own language and talking to each other, and no one knew what they were saying. So the scarier side of the AI technology. But Verizon was showcasing some of their new bots out there. Coming up in Canada, Manulife is scheduled to hold an investor day just to talk about leadership team. The leadership team started to talk about update to shareholders on the strategic positioning of the company and their focus on Asia and global wealth and asset management businesses, and also trying to execute on their digital strategy, which every company, of course, is these days. And Canadian convenience store chain Cont'd is out there to post in their fourth quarter earnings. Very likely to see an increase in revenues, although, as I mentioned, probably a little bit of pressure on their profits as increased costs through the pandemic to deliver their services went up or continue to impact profits. And we saw that pretty much across the retail industry. In Canadian news, the TSX actually outrunning Wall Street a little bit on its earnings growth as the global economy rebounds. We're seeing some soaring earnings in a lot of Canadians' main stock indexes, and the portfolio managers are raising confidence, have raised their confidence on a more commodity-linked economy like Canada's over a growth-based economy like the U.S., and that just tends to lean into a little bit on that that inflationary pressure down the road. And Canada's Brookfield business partner is acquiring a Modulaire Group for $5 billion. Well, here's one that's not $5 billion; it's $2 billion. Basically, they came into an agreement with the UK-based group to buy up the private equity firm TDR for $5 billion. On the foreign exchange front, the US dollars rose slightly again on that theme of the Delta variant concern as international money flew into the safe haven of the US dollar as it's seen. We did see a little bit of weakness though in the euro, again shaken a little bit by that Delta variant, and also getting some message from their Federal Reserve to see where they're going to move, their central bank compared to the US Federal Reserve, as far as how they're going to keep that loose monetary policy compared to the tightening or the withdrawal of support that the US Fed is starting to look at a strategy around, and see if the European Central Bank follows suit there. On the oil front, we did see it tick down lower, but then tick back up again today. So we did see a bit of a decline on Monday. Well, biggest one-day decline in recent months, but not that impactful. Again, just around that Delta variant that we're seeing pop up in Asia and the UK. There's a lot of concern around whether the Chinese version of the vaccine is as effective as the Pfizer, Moderna, and AstraZeneca against the Delta variant. So there's a lot of testing happening on that front. There's probably an element of speculation, taking some risk off the table as well around the OPEC as they agree to meet again on Thursday just to shore up a supply. Copper also fell a little bit, again, just on that Delta variant. And gold slightly lower, just watching the Fed, looking at see if they're going to tighten their monetary policy and see what that picture might look like in the coming weeks. So let's talk about AI. So before we get into that, of course, I think when we say AI or artificial intelligence, we all have different visions of it. I think a lot of the things that first come to mind is kind of what we see in the movies. And that's certainly in discussion, as I talked about. Facebook have robots. We saw Verizon have robots out there, all communicating and learning and being able to do tasks. But for the most part, that type of AI is still much further down the road. And a lot of it is still more logarithmic based, meaning rule based. So you do this if this happens, or do this if this situation happens. It's not the necessarily the software thinking on its own. It's just following a set of rules, and it will act appropriately within those rules that it's given. So there's still a lot of that, but we are seeing AI grow and grow more in really the big part that we're going to talk a lot about today is deep data mining. So this goes a lot around those antitrust suits as well, is big data. There's and we will talk a little bit around kind of Google and Facebook and all these companies that access or mine our data online, but almost every company out there is mining data that their company has, right? So excuse me, their company has data around their clients, what they've bought, the type of services that they've used, where they live, et cetera, their age groups, all the, you think about all the data you give to companies that you work with. Those companies are taking a look at that data and trying to figure patterns out. They're trying to figure out how to better service. Now, it's not always the big brother scary data mining. A lot of it is just how can we better service this client, right? What are their needs? Maybe we can anticipate their needs ahead of what they of them actually need and are wanting it, so that we're there at the front line when they need it, with when they're going to need us to provide those things for them. So I don't know that there's a company out there, everything from your grocery stores to your banks to your car dealerships, everyone out there is basically trying to better understand their customers and better grow the relationship with them, but also understanding where they, what their customers look like, so they can go try to find other customers like that. So, learning their customers' habits, learning where they shop, what they do, and saying, okay, well, if that's what 80% of my customers do, then that's where I should be looking for new customers, because those people are very much going to need our services or my services, and they're very likely to want to engage with us. So this is happening, and this is where AI is playing a big role. Is mining this data, finding those patterns, learning those patterns, and try to leverage off that. And as I said, every company to their own extent that they have data, but then of course the big companies out there that are combining the data that they get from all these different source companies, or any sources that they can get. And as I mentioned to you, I think a couple of weeks ago, if you have an iPhone, you've noticed every time you go into an app these days, it says, do you want this app to track you? So this is Apple basically giving you, the switch to turn off some of that tracking from those apps, because they all talk to each other, right? As they're all tracking each other, they're talking to each other and sharing your habits, where you go and what you're doing. And the idea behind that is to, be able to create this profile of data that the AI can now anticipate what you want, or things that might be of interest to you, or services that might be of interest to you. So it's so you can, it goes back to that, you can turn that tracking off of each individual app if you'd like, to prevent some of that data getting out there. Also, in voice recognition, this is becoming bigger and bigger. Whether you're talking to home devices, your vehicles, it's big for people with disabilities to be able, especially hearing disabilities, to convert talk to text. Also language interpretation. Voice recognition is getting better and better, and it's that AI being able to learn not just local accents, different languages, but your own. As you use it, the AI learns your speech patterns and can convert, what you say more accurately into text, or translate it to a machine so that it understands. Of course, autonomous vehicles are out there. going to be driving us all around soon. There's just AI goes in there to anticipate movements around them. Like of course, they have sensors scanning their environment, but to anticipate movements, anticipate prevention of accidents, and also right and wrong as far as to what actions it should take. And neural networks. So we've seen a lot of this of people being able to actually write a paragraph just by your computer reading your neural network, and big applications around that again in the to help those with prosthetics, but also communication with these new AIs. So predicting the future is still fairly far out when it comes to AI. So be a little bit careful when invested into these areas. There's a lot of new technology out there. It's a fast speed of adoption, but it's also a fast speed of change. Really, as I always hammer home, why are you buying something? What are the revenue growth potential, but profits and cash flow as well? Where is that coming from? Is it repeatable? Do they have any? First of all, and if they don't, when is the company going to get into profits? How long is that? How much cash do they have to raise before they get there? So what do they need to spend in order to get to a point that they can actually turn a profit? And how much recurring revenue do they need to at least cover their base costs? So let's take a look at some companies out there. And some of these names you're probably not going to think of when you think of AI, but really they're at the forefront of these things. And right at the top, I put NVIDIA. So NVIDIA, I've mentioned them many times. They're a big chip manufacturer, especially in the gaming community. They've also been really big in the cryptocurrency because they're used for the mining computers. But in order to run AI, you need that high performance chip capacity, and NVIDIA is at the forefront of that. So, more and more we talk about AI, well, those chips are going to have to go into those, anything from gaming to any of the categories I mentioned before, and of course, those autonomous vehicles out there. Alphabet's Google's parent company. So of course, as I mentioned, that big data mining, AI technology, and they're also in the autonomous vehicle area. They're in that voice area, the voice search area. Quantum computing is big with AI. So Google, of course, has a lot of money and a lot of research going into AI and development, and they're at the forefront. Salesforce.com, if you're not familiar with Salesforce, it's if not the largest, one of the largest contact relationship management softwares that people use to keep in companies use in sales roles or just a service role to keep track of orders, clients, data, and communications. And they use a software called Einstein that adds AI to, again, look for patterns, find added value for customers, scraping data as much as possible that comes in, and finds ways to use it to produce sales leads for companies, but also predict superior marketing usage. Amazon, of course, not just their Alexa, which is learning all our habits at home, but also Amazon's shopping network. It learns your buying habits. It learns trends in shopping across the retail spectrum as well. Microsoft, Azure, and of course their home AI tools, also working with their medicine, language, robotics, and medical imaging. Again, all AI driven. Twillo's, maybe not as popular of a household name, but a cloud-based application. So this goes back to data mining, and also their APIs or application interfaces, which allow developers to build that connectivity, whether it's voice, video, and messaging through their apps, which is all AI based. So a lot of times when you're on your apps and you're asking for help, and it's not a person you're talking to, it's an AI. And it will try to get you an answer, and if it can't, it'll flip you to a person, and you might never know that switchover happens. IBM, you might not have heard this name in tech for a long time. They haven't been really big out there, but they've been investing a lot in their cloud and data, AI, and also the quantum computing, kind of the next level of computers to build out that growth market for them in the future. Facebook, I mentioned, of course, that again goes to the data, everything from the nudes that you follow, the friends you're connected with, the type of things you like and dislike on there, all that's tracked in order to find patterns. Tencent. So Tencent was a US social media giant, is now a Chinese social media giant, owning things like WeChat, which is the huge social media, kind of our Snapchat, I guess, or that. Big in the news when, and TikTok, sorry. Big in the news under the Trump administration, where they tried to shut those applications down here in the United States, or bar them from use in the United States because of their links to China. So that's the parent company, Tencent. And then lastly, the one you might not know, DocuSign. DocuSign, you might have used it to sign documents, electronic signatures. Doesn't seem like it would be AI, but actually they went out and made a purchase of a software that is actually reading legal documents and will highlight problems or clauses much quicker, obviously, than a human can read them, so that the human only has to go in and review those clauses or review those areas of the contracts or the documentation that stand out as could be a problem. And obviously, as it learns more and more, it becomes more and more efficient at doing that. So DocuSign is another company that's moving big into AI, and again, much more practical application than maybe the movies would have us believe. So with that, I'm not going to keep you. I know it's hot and it's hard to sit in front of the computer. Go get a drink, go cool off. Enjoy your week. If you have any questions or you want to see more of our content, just reach out to us at mikeonmoney.com. Otherwise, I'll see you in 2 weeks. I'm going to be off next week. I've got a couple of things going on for work that is going to have me tied up on Tuesday, but I will be back the following week, so we'll send you notifications of that. I'll try to get out a recorded video for this week as well. For next week, just so that I'll keep you updated all the same. With that, stay safe out there, everyone, and enjoy.